Welcome, everybody, to our HDI Local Chapters live stream show. This show is brought to you by Robert Half Technology, who's a leading provider of technology professionals needed to build, deploy, and operate technology in this digital world. And they do this by placing highly skilled IT professionals either on a contract, project, or even a full-time permanent basis so that you can keep your businesses going. And you also can browse available candidates, you can search for jobs, and you can also find some additional valuable information on hiring and career insights at roberthalf.com/technology. All right, so today our guest is Rocky Trono. Now, Rocky, first of all, is a good friend of mine that I met several years ago through the HDI community. And if you heard our pre-show, we were talking about, we met at HDI Leadership Summit, which if you're a member of HDI, it's a great opportunity to find out more about HDI and running an organization as well as leadership. But let's talk a little bit about Rocky. Rocky is also a local chapter officer in our San Francisco Bay Area and a strategic alliance manager at DriveSavers Data Recovery. And he brings almost a decade of experience in the storage and technology services industry. And I got to tell you this about Rocky. He preaches backup, 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 and he knows how to help you or your clients if you suffer a data loss situation. Welcome to the show, Rocky.
Hey, Tom, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So listen, you have a wealth of knowledge and experience and expertise, but we're going to unpack a specific area today. And I wanted to talk to you to share with our guests about things about mobile devices and storage and things. So what I wanted to ask you to start off the show is, what is the biggest use you see people using mobile devices for, especially in the components of it and what people look for when they're buying one?
When it comes to mobile devices these days, we can recall going back many years, you'd have your phone and you'd have your camera. You'd have two devices, and one would be for getting in touch, right? One would be heavy as exactly. There was your setup, you'd have it in a knapsack, and one was for contacting friends, family, and the other capturing moments. And these days, we just have one device, right?
Yeah.
And they capture those moments, they text your friends and post the same content that you just created, whether that be a video, a picture. So oftentimes I think most of these devices and their storage are filled up with high quality video, high quality pictures. These days with so many different great not only shows and movies you can download, they've got everything. I mean, you don't have to have your laptop on the plane to watch a video. There you are with your tablet or your phone, and inherently that's a lot of data.
Yeah. And you talk about that, and I remember, I'm old enough to remember that when I held up this camcorder, I didn't have a thing called a cell phone, so I didn't have that, but but you do it's interesting you say that, because we went from like those camcorders and these little, if you're used to them, you got these little teeny screens. We used to think that was funny. How do you watch a little thing through there? But now we start out cell phones that small, right? And you get on an airplane, and you have to, if you want to watch a movie that you have on your own, or you want to connect to the airplanes, you have to have a mobile device. Like if you're using one of those big movie streaming services, they require a mobile OS. So, it's kind of relevant to our topic tonight about these things. There's a lot of reasons why we went from a laptop or a big desktop down to these mobile devices. So let's talk about, you talked about like what we put on these, a lot of movies, a lot of videos. People that are YouTubing or Twitching, they're doing it on their devices, a lot of mobile phones, because they are pretty high quality nowadays. Let's talk about some future planning. Like, what are some things that people need to consider when they're buying a new mobile device, whether it be a cell phone, a laptop, or a tablet?
So with these days, as we all know, everything is getting smaller and smaller, and which is fantastic on the end user side. I can fit twice the amount of stuff in my backpack, as well as having my mobile devices. The unfortunate thing is a lot of them have soldered on NVMe, which when you go to purchase a device, you better be ready to future think, what are you going to put on this device? A lot of times you might think, well, I'll go for a lower capacity or mid capacity. But once you get to that, Right. I mean, you do save quite a bit of money, but if you were to upgrade from that point, there are times when in specific models and devices, it's soldered on. There's nothing that can be done. If you've got a 128 gig NAND flash chipset there, that's what you're stuck with unless you buy another device. So in thinking, well, I've only got 60 gigs on this device, the 128 will be fine. But in a few years, are you going to fill that up even more? And at that point, you get too close to capacity, it can really start to cause some issues.
Yeah, and it's funny you said, because I remember back in the day, I was sharing with you in a previous conversation that I had a Commodore 64, and it's like 64K of memory. Like, and when you say that, it's like funny. I remember getting my cell phones. I remember I have a Samsung 6, and I actually could add more memory to this one. This is back when you could add more memory to the phones. But and when I moved up to the next phone, I thought like you. I thought like what you said is like, who needs more than 256 gigs of memory, or like, really? But you're right. Fast forward to 2020, and I'm talking to people where I work about buying computers for their students and things, and I'm going, just because you can save a couple $100 doesn't mean you should get the 8 gigs of RAM instead of the 32 gigs of RAM. I said, because I remember, Rocky, you mentioned like at first it started with memory was soldered on, and then there's one slot you could add, and then there was no slots you could add, and now they're the solid state drives. Which, if if you've ever seen a solid state drive, tear apart a flash drive, if you don't know what they look like, it just looks like a stick of memory almost, and it can be soldered right in. And a lot of the major manufacturers are doing that. I know the big three that we use here, they all started doing that. It makes it very challenging, not only for us to talk to people about you need to plan your future purchase, but also for repair. So let's talk a little bit about that, Rocky. Let's back up this conversation, and let's talk a little about when you're planning about backing up and repair options, like how this could affect when you're planning things when you're buying a new mobile device.
Absolutely. Depending on the device, there's a host of platforms for backing up, depending on if you're, an iOS user or an Android user. But the big thing that we always preach at DriveSavers, unless you really want to work with us, we're happy to take care of you, is a 3-2-1 backup. You want to have 3 copies of that data on 2 different sources, and then maybe one in the cloud per se, a cloud provider of your choice, of course, that you like. Tons out there. And the big thing is if you're not going to say use a cloud function to have tethered backups, connect your phone weekly, maybe even monthly if you're on the go. A lot of people travel, right? Have a backup device, because you never know when you might drop your phone walking across the street, and sure enough, there's a taxi cab rolling by and smushes it to smithereens. Having a backup of a few weeks ago is a whole lot better than having to figure out what did I have from the past year on there.
Yeah.
Someone's graduation, so many moments, and it could be voice memos, and backing up is critical with these devices. Again, with your laptop, a lot of folks will be like, I've got the solid state drive in there. There's no moving parts in it. It's going to be a little more robust than the laptop. But, if I had my water right here and it fell over on the keyboard, it's going to short out the logic board, possibly the SSD that's on there. And if I didn't have a backup, in trouble.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like, I mentioned I have one of these because I was a pretty frugal guy back in the day, and I don't want to pay for backups. So until I went to my son's graduation and I needed all those pictures, and right about that same time, someone at work lost all of their stuff, and I went, okay, so I got one of these, and this is great. This is before a lot of the cloud stuff came out. But this is a backup drive, and Rocky, from looking at the size of this, very well what's in this thing. It's spinning rust. It's a 3.5-inch drive, and it could easily fall susceptible. But I tell you this, like you mentioned these flash drives. How many times have you heard? Because I could tell you I've experienced this way too many times where I've done something dumb, like pulled it out of the USB slot, or I did something dumb, and these things fry just as easy, and you lose everything. So you're right. Like, I have multiple ways of like multiple areas of backing up my stuff now because of that. You know, when I met you, I think I met you probably 3 or 4 years ago at that leadership summit, and you were showing me different things, and I was like, oh my goodness, I really need. I think I went home that weekend and I purchased online storage, and I went, you know, $20 a year really isn't that expensive. Stop being stupid.
Right. And at the end of the day, you know, it's just funny you mentioned it. I've got let's see here, a couple of these guys still hanging around
Right.
with,
Yes.
you know, my old favorite mixtapes. And I thought I was so cool many years ago with, right, there you go. And I had a keychain of flash drives, and I thought, you know, they were perfectly robust and everything's great. And I think it was my sophomore year of college. I can't recall, but you know, this right there. And, you know, 10, 15 years ago, they were a lot bigger, and using the school's desktop, that of course the tower's sitting on the ground. Well, I plugged my thumb drive right on in and started working, and swiveled the chair, and sure enough, snapped it in half. And that was that. I didn't know what to do at that time in regards to how can I recover this. Thankfully, I know where to go now and what to do. But back then it was, I got to recreate all of this. Oh my gosh. And a lot of that stuff was scanned in, because this information given was usually on paper, and then you got to digitize it versus now digital. And now you got to print it if you want a hard copy.
Right. Well, and then the other thing is you have these, you know, the flash drives, then you have the micro USB, right? But the problem with these are, you know, I don't know if you can see this one. This one's, I think, a 1 gig. So this was big back in the day. I bought these, but then you think about, like, I have like 10 or 15 of these. Now, how do you catalog these and know which on what and things? So yeah, it's a challenge. There's a lot of things to think about when you're doing this. There's certainly, for those of you that are security minded, these may be a lot safer. But like Rocky mentioned, make sure you have a couple backups when you're, you know, a couple different ones, because one of these could easily go bad. Even if you have the ones that's sitting on your desk or your table that are even the solid states can go bad, you know, as well. So, so Rocky, you know, I want to move on to one other topic, but is there any other things, you know, anything else you'd like to share about like concerns or things to plan about for backing up or failures and damage before we move on?
Yeah, you know, I think the simplest thing is make it easy for yourself when backing up. If you have a very cumbersome system, as time moves on, you're not going to want to do it. You're like, I'll do it next week, and I'll do it next week. And with data loss, it's always Murphy's Law. It's always, you know, I was just about to do it. Right. Yeah. So I keep it easy. I have a couple I have 2 on-site backups. I keep one in the cloud, and then I also have one that I keep with a buddy. And it may be a few months old, or during the pandemic, of course, older than that. But if for some odd reason there was a fire, God forbid, and there's a point at which, even with data recovery, if the heat's hot enough, it's going to melt platters, it's going to melt NAND flash, and once it's melted, not much we can do. So an offsite backup's very critical. You can have 4 different devices in your place, and you know, in a worst case scenario. So I always think make it easy, keep something off site, have 2 on premise, maybe you're in the cloud, but just something that you can keep up with, and it's easy for you to do weekly or bi-weekly.
Yeah. And we're not talking like companies. We're talking like, you know, you're telling me like, make a backup, take it to my brother's house or my mom and dad's house, you know, and that way I have another physical copy, you know, and that's so true. I really like that. And that is like, you know I personally, I use several cloud backup solutions, especially through where I work. I have one that saves things for 30 days, and I have one that's more of a long-term solution. And then I have my one that's, you know, sitting at home just in case. So I'm gonna have to get on that, moving one to my, especially my pictures. 'Cause you know, it's a minor tragedy when you lose things like that.
Absolutely.
So Rocky, you know, I want to talk about, I have like 2 more quick issues, and we're down to about 3 minutes, believe it or not. I told you this would go fast. You know, you and I chatted a little bit earlier about, you know, struggles that you see people dealing with when you're trying to do platform switching, you know, and I'm talking like Linux to Windows or Windows to Mac. What are some of the struggles that you see with people that either prevent them or that they have to deal with on switching platforms that maybe backups could help a little bit anyway?
If a lot of times, if you have for a very simple example, if you have something that's say in a specific program for photos, I always recommend, because that's always the big one, family photos. A lot of the times work documents, they can be recreated. It's just cumbersome, takes time. But family photos, if they're gone, unfortunately, if you don't have a hard copy, they're gone. I use a couple of different applications within, within the Apple world, if you will. I keep a lot of my editing on that side of things, but I also keep the photos themselves in a backup drive that are numbered and dated, and it just has the JPEG in there and or video. So it's not tied to, say, a specific platform. And in that case, something that's as easy as a file type can be moved to, let's say I wanted to get on over to an NTFS-based system, I can easily move that right on over. So again, going on the simple side of things is keep an easy, simple to use plan where you dump your photos and your home videos, just for starters.
Yeah, and I know, and it's not just for switching platforms, but this is just in general, because I know, like, I live in a house divided. Two of us have iPhones, two of us have Androids. And I know that, like, I had my boss one day sent me some pictures of a classroom that we needed to work on, and he has an Apple, and he sent them to me in Apple formatted picture format, and I couldn't read them. So, like, your suggestion is, if you're going to be trading, information, data, pictures, whatever, with other people, think about the format you're using as well. That's a good point.
Right. Just something that's cross-platform capable. And I'm right there with you, because there are some things that work great on one platform, then on another platform, you can't access it. And it's like, why isn't this opening? Right.
Yeah. I think you and I talked about it before. Like, I was talking to my son the other day, and my wife was like, "You should get an iPhone." He's like, "No." And the reason I will not get an iPhone is I use this app for D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, that they didn't write for Apple. So that's the reason. I'm like, that's so funny, because I told you prior that I have a transit app for work that they don't write for Apple, because I was going to switch, and that was one of the reasons I didn't. Rocky, we're down to about 45 seconds to a minute left. I want you to tell us a little bit, like, some takeaways for the audience on things to consider from work from home issues. You and I chatted about a little bit of, you've already talked a little bit on, but things for people to think about when they're working from home with mobile devices.
Yep. So if you're working from home with a mobile device, it's good to check your backups, ensure that those backups are there. For those folks who are using a cloud platform, it's good to check those backups as well and ensure that what you think is being backed up is actually being backed up. And what we see a lot at DriveSavers, especially in the past year plus of working remote, a lot of coffee spills. The cat knocked over the coffee, the dog kicked over the tea, and keep your devices away from water. They don't really go together.
No, and it's funny, because I'm right now, and when I'm working from home, I have a desktop down below, so it's kind of easy. But when I have my laptop, I can't tell you, even at work where I had my laptop docked, and I use those new docking stations with like USB-C, and it's just too easy to spill things. I wrecked a USB-C dock and a laptop. That was not fun, nor a nice conversation with my boss.
Right. And again, if you can keep things elevated too, that's good too. So if you have something spill over, it's not, it could prevent it. But again, keep the beverages in a safer location.
Let me see if I can show. My laptop is elevated over there off to the side. So
I've got mine on about a 6 or 7 inch stand here, and I keep the cables behind. So just in case.
Well, Rocky, we're at the end of the show, man. I told you, my friend, this would go fast. So I want to thank you once again for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing this valuable information with us. And I want to remind everybody that we're on every Wednesday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Next week, we're going to have a sort of like a reunion show where as we mentioned last week, we're over half a year in the books. Rocky, your show number 30, by the way, on the weekly thing. So we're getting there, right? And so we're going to bring back some of our guests from the first half of the year that were some of our more popular topics and things like that. Of course, a lot of them were popular, but we had to limit our Brady Bunch screen to just a few. So we're going to do that next week. And also remember to like us and follow us on Twitch and YouTube, and follow hashtag HDI Local. I'd like to thank everybody again, and we'll see you next week.